This hour of the Costa Report is brought to you by Tableau Software and Dole Food Company.
Welcome to the Costa Report. I'm Rebecca Costa, and thank you for joining me for another 2 hours of Straight Talk Radio. I want to welcome members of our armed forces who are tuning in from remote outposts over the internet, along with new listeners in the Arizona, Chicago, California, and Florida areas. Thank you for your many emails and letters and for being with us again. In just a moment, business icon and editor-in-chief of Forbes magazine, Mr. Steve Forbes, will be joining us to talk about the urgent need for tax reform, as well as his economic forecast for the year ahead. Be prepared to listen up and take notes, because Mr. Forbes is the only financial writer to receive the Crystal Owl Award 4 times for offering the most accurate economic forecast. But before Mr. Forbes joins us, as is my custom each week, let me tell you a little about his background. Malcolm Stevenson Forbes Jr. was born in Morristown, New Jersey, and grew up in the town of Far Hills. He is a graduate of Princeton University, where, incidentally, he founded his first magazine called Business Today. Forbes had the good fortune to be born into a successful publishing family who was active in politics. His grandfather, B.C. Forbes, founded Forbes magazine, and his father, Malcolm, later assumed responsibility for Forbes magazine, along with being a state senator and well-known entrepreneur. In addition to having 2 strong role models, Steve Forbes had the opportunity to enter the family business as a columnist and assume the role of chairman and editor-in-chief of Forbes Media. But that's only part of the story. Mr. Forbes was appointed by Presidents Reagan and Bush to chair the Board for International Broadcasting, and he is known for his bid for the Republican presidential nomination in 1996 and 2000. He has been a strong advocate for small government, tax reform, school vouchers, tough crime laws, and can be frequently seen on Fox News and other networks offering insights on the economy and U.S. policy. And in between all of this, Mr. Forbes has found time to author 4 books and serve on the board of Freedom Works, the National Taxpayers Union, the Heritage Foundation, the Ronald Reagan Presidential Foundation, the Memorial Sloan Kettering Cancer Center, and, well, too many organizations for me to list in the short time we have today. It's my pleasure to welcome to the Costa Report publishing executive and iconic figure in business, Mr. Steve Forbes. Thank you for joining us today, Mr. Forbes.
Good to be with you, Rebecca. Thank you.
During the next month, as you know, Americans will be engaging in the annual ritual of calculating and filing our taxes, and tax reform has been something that you have championed for decades. So for younger listeners who might not be familiar with the benefits of a flat tax versus a fair tax or the current tax system we have now, maybe we could open today's conversation with having you explain what a flat tax on income is and why is this more equitable?
Well, we do need radical tax reform, and this season reminds us of it. As you know, the Declaration of Independence had only 1,400 words, the Bible 783,000 words, and the Federal Income Tax Code with all the attendant rules and regulations, not just the code itself, which is 4 million words, but there are several million more words of interpretations, analytics, and things like that. And the thing is so complex, nobody knows what's in it. The IRS's hotline, back in the days when they used to answer the hotline, has been found to be wrong by government investigations 25 to 30% of the time. The preparers that the IRS prepared people to do help people with their tax returns, the latest numbers for 2011 found an error rate as high as 61%. So this thing as it stands now breeds corruption, brings out the worst in us, is a plaything for lobbyists, and really undermines America. The IRS estimated last year we spent 6 billion hours filling out tax forms. Imagine all that brain power had been doing something productive like new products and services or new medical devices or new cures for diseases like Alzheimer's. So what a flat tax would do is recognize this current code as beyond redemption and replace it with a new system, single rate, generous exemptions for adults and for children. A family of 4, for example, would pay no federal income tax on their first $52,000 of wages, only 17% above the $52,000 on each dollar they earned, no tax on savings, and no death taxes. Death should not be a taxable event. And on the business side, we cut the rate from 35 to 17%, do away with all the corruption and clutter in that part of the code, and allow businesses to instantly expense capital investments they make. And if they have a loss from those write-offs, they can carry it forward against future profits. So literally, and 30 countries have done this around the world, more than 30, you can literally do your tax return on a single sheet of paper or just a few keystrokes on your computer.
Well, now, recently you've pointed out that Greece's economy is tanking in spite of a 23% VAT tax and a 45% payroll tax. Yet the countries surrounding Greece, Bulgaria, Albania, Macedonia, who have a flat tax, are expanding. So it seems like we have a real side-by-side comparison, and this isn't just a theory anymore. And also Russia. Didn't Russia also move to a flat tax system that's similar as well?
Russia did about 14, 15 years ago when Putin first took power, Vladimir Putin, before he became czar for life. One of the first things he did, which I think was the height of his statesmanship, he peaked early, was put in a flat tax. Russia had a hideously complex system, far worse than our own. And the flat tax, when it was put in, the rate was 13%, down from 35%. And the economy did well, and revenues more than doubled quickly because of not only the economic growth, but also the simplicity of collecting it. Hong Kong has had a variation of the flat tax for over 60 years, and it's been a key part of their long-term economic success.
So what do you say to people who say if you take everybody's income tax and everything above approximately $52,000 is taxable at 17%, it won't be enough money because we owe, what is it? The debt is up to $18 trillion now? How can you cut taxes and pay an $18 trillion debt off?
Well, you don't first pay the debt off. You just try to make sure you have a vibrant economy so you don't keep increasing the debt. That would be a major achievement.
I think the most recent estimate is by the next presidential election we'll be up to $20 trillion. I think that's the forecast.
Yeah, and it just gets worse as you look out. And part of that is the result of a sluggish economy. What a flat tax does with lower rates, a low single rate, is that it does not punish productive work, risk-taking, or success. And experience has shown time and time again, when you have a low rate, you do get more of the things that make an economy grow. You get more job creation, more entrepreneurship, better ability to gain skills and move up the economic ladder of success. So again, real-life experience demonstrates that when you don't put a burden on people, they're able to do more good things.
So, in other words, with less of a burden, this additional money gets recirculated into the economy in terms of consumer purchases, investment capital, and so on.
Well, when people create resources, they usually handle them better than passing it off to a third party, i.e. the federal government. But the key thing, too, though, is the price. When you lose 50 or 60% of your income when you work, the desire to work extra hours goes down exponentially. And it also hurts capital creation. When you have very high income tax rates, you don't get the kind of investment that you get that is necessary for a productive economy. An economy can't move forward unless people are investing. You take somebody like Steve Jobs. He didn't do it for the money, obviously. He had a passion. But what was critical to his success was getting the capital to be able to develop his products, market his products, and develop a globe-girdling company.
Well, you're absolutely right about that. In recent years, with the IPO market being devastated, we saw it have a tremendous effect on the amount of capital available to startups. Now, we have to take our first break, but stay right where you are. When we come back, we're going to find out why Mr. Forbes says Congress is biased against tax cuts. You're listening to the Costa Report.
Do you love creating salads as much as you enjoy eating them? Hi, I'm Amy Tobin, cookbook author and culinary expert. Dole inspires fresh and wholesome dishes for any meal with their wide selection of salad blends and all-natural salad kits. From the mild and tender texture of sweet butter lettuce to the crunch of classic romaine sprinkled with colorful shredded carrots and red cabbage, Dole has over 30 salad blends to satisfy every palate. If you're looking for the ultimate in convenience, try Dole's unique salad kit combinations that include farm-fresh lettuces and vegetables, mouth-watering all-natural toppings, and specially made dressings. It's all you need to make a distinctively delicious salad. The possibilities are endless. Visit www.dolesalads.com for recipes and other ideas to feed your culinary imagination.
If you're wondering what to do with all that data you're creating, do I have an offer for you? Tableau is drag-and-drop software that people of any skill level can use to analyze and turn data into something actionable. That's right, I said actionable. And isn't that what all that data is for? With Tableau, you can connect to any data in virtually any format and visualize it on the fly. Databases, spreadsheets, even big data sources are instantly combined into usable charts, graphs, reports, and dashboards. People can analyze data and drag and drop at 10 times the speed of a traditional business intelligence system. But the most impressive thing about Tableau is that anyone can use it. And just to prove the point, you can get a free 14-day trial from Tableau just by mentioning you heard this ad. But do it now, because this offer won't last. For your free 14-day trial, visit Tableau at tableau.com/Costa. That's tableau.com/Costa. Tableau software. What's your data trying to tell you?
Hi, I'm Elaine, a student at Hillsdale College. Here is Hillsdale College President Larry Arnn on the importance of the presidential oath of office.
Members of Congress and federal judges take an oath to the Constitution, but the Constitution prescribes the exact words of the oath only for the president. The American presidency was a new and powerful office created at the Constitutional Convention of 1787. Nothing like it existed in any other constitution in history. It was designed to allow certain virtues: decision, activity, secrecy, dispatch, things like that. And they were thought to be essential to executive power, especially in a crisis. But despite this immense power, the president is not so powerful as the Constitution itself. That is why presidents must pledge to preserve, protect, and defend the Constitution, and why it is the duty of the people to ensure that they do so.
This Constitution Minute was brought to you by Hillsdale College. To join the national conversation on the Constitution, go to constitutionminute.com.
Money can't make you happy, but the lack of it can sure add a lot of stress to your life. Need help with your personal finances? Listen Thursday nights at 7 p.m. to Money Moves. Host Pamela Fugit-Hedrick offers 1 hour of free tips and tools to help you manage your cash flows with her Money Moves. Each Thursday night, she discusses topics like how to prevent a complete personal financial meltdown, how to start a go-to fund for emergencies, provide ideas on how to cut back rather than cutting out some of your expenses, how to erase your debt load and financial stressors, how to find funding for your retirement, how the heck do you enroll to use health insurance. No more excuses. Money Moves can answer these questions and so much more. Tune in Money Moves with your host, Pamela Fugit-Hedrick, Thursday night from 7 to 8 p.m. to work on your money moves.
Welcome back to the Costa Report. I'm Rebecca Costa, and my guest today is editor-in-chief of Forbes magazine. And before the break, you were pointing out that China and Russia moved to a flat tax, which not only simplified their tax system so that citizens had to spend very little time preparing and reporting their taxes each year, but the simplification also reduces errors, removes the need for so many audits and oversight, and eliminates loopholes which experts can exploit. Now, do you mind if I ask you, where do you stand on the idea of a fair tax, a tax on sales only?
Well, the challenge is, first is the high rate you need if you're going to use it to replace the income tax and payroll taxes. It's about 30%. And when people hear that number, they automatically flee in horror. There are other challenges. One is they assume that governments will pay a 30% sales tax. So if the Pentagon buys an aircraft carrier for $10 billion, they assume that the government will pay itself a $3 billion sales tax. I don't think that's going to happen. Another one is the 16th Amendment to the Constitution. The 16th Amendment allows Washington to impose an income tax. If you don't repeal that amendment, then you can almost be guaranteed that we're going to end up with both an income tax and a sales tax, which is what most states have and virtually every country in the world has today. Another challenge is what is a business? Let's say you go to a store and buy lumber and say you're using it to make furniture to sell on eBay. Who's going to audit you to make sure that that's exactly what you did? Because if you buy products under the fair tax, the national sales tax for business purposes, you don't pay the tax on it. Only the ultimate consumer pays the tax. And then they have what they call a rebate or prebate, where they give everyone a certain amount of money to get around the regressiveness of the tax, which, again, how do they put the list together, people to get the money? They're going to means test the thing. You can imagine politicians saying, "Oh, we should give more to poor people and less to rich people." So the thing has its own complexities. So I think the easiest way to get a radical, big reform is to do the flat tax today, and I think there's growing support for it. There are several presidential candidates interested in putting out their proposals. I think we'll see some in the next 2 to 3 months.
Well, there's no question the fair tax does lend itself to more layers of complexity. And anytime you open that barn door, we start to see pages and pages of interpretations. And so I think I write about this. I write about how complexity really creates the conditions for predatory behavior. And I worry about that. I think the more complicated legislation, laws, and procedures become, the less capable that people that are, one, uneducated or can't go out and hire and pay for the best experts in the world, the less advantage that they have. So let's talk about these tax cuts for a moment. Where would you have the Republican Congress start? I mean, where would they get some support from fellow Democrats in the White House?
Well, I think today, the White House is a different matter, but I think today there is a consensus in Congress that our business taxes need reform. And I think if you took Democrats and Republicans from the Ways and Means Committee in the House of Representatives, that committee is where tax legislation is supposed to begin, the Finance Committee in the Senate, which also considers tax legislation, that committee. If you put them in a room together, I think they could come up with the starts of good reforms on the corporate tax side. But the Democrats aren't going to do it if they feel that the White House won't back them up. They feel now the White House won't cover their backs, so they're not going to do it. And unfortunately, President Obama, even though he mouths the words about reducing the corporate tax rate and reform of the code, the reality is he wants higher taxes, and Republicans are not going to go along with any program that's going to have a net increase in federal taxes.
Now, specifically under the banner of corporate taxes, are there any specific corporate tax areas that you'd like to see them hit first?
Well, this whole area of special breaks for special industries. You can find all sorts of justifications for this break and that break in terms of depreciation schedules, faster, slower. But the bottom line is that it ends up distorting the code. Mm-hmm. A few days ago, the head of Domino Pizza did an interview with the Wall Street Journal in which he pointed out he pays an effective rate of 38%. And he said, plaintively, with a hint of humor, mm-hmm. He said, no one has come up with a tax break for a tax loophole for the pizza industry. But that's the state we're in today. And and one of the things they should start on the tax side, on the corporate tax side, is stop double taxation of profits. If you make a profit overseas, you not only pay the profit in the country in which you made it, you also end up paying U.S. income tax on it when you bring that money home. So we now
isn't that to discourage people from setting up shop overseas? Isn't that sort of supposed to be a disincentive?
Well, we live in a global economy. You take Apple, for example. It could not survive if you didn't allow it to use the world as its parts suppliers. And you look at the companies today, Coca-Cola. We don't want Coke to sell around the world. Maybe Pepsi wouldn't, but I think most other people think they don't have a right to sell around the world. But you look at companies today, they have over $1 trillion of cash sitting overseas that stays overseas because if they bring it home, they pay a huge tax, which is kind of counterproductive. So these rules that try to mold our behavior end up having unintended consequences, which is leaving a lot of money overseas instead of having it work here at home.
Now, recently you wrote an article where you claim that Congress is biased against real tax cuts, and you said that the primary obstacle is the Congressional Budget Office and the Joint Committee on Taxation. Is that right?
That's right. They have what they call scoring. So if you propose a tax change, you have it, what they call the Congressional Budget Office, then goes and sees how much it might cost, what it might do to the economy. And unfortunately, their bias is that they assume when you increase taxes, it doesn't change people's behavior. A number of years ago, back in the mid-'90s, a senator from Oregon, a fellow named Robert Packwood, asked the budget scorers to score what would happen if you had a 100% income tax rate.
100%, okay.
100%, and they came back and said, by golly, it would be glorious. The deficit would be paid off. And of course, 100% would destroy the economy, but they didn't see it that way.
I see. They are only looking at the income, and they're not looking at the other ramifications.
Not at the stimulus, and not all tax cuts are equal. Some don't do very much for the economy. Others, when you say cut capital gains, has an immediate impact both in positive revenue and in good economic behavior.
Absolutely. Now, we have to take another commercial break. When we come back, we're going to talk about why Mr. Forbes is forecasting a bumpy ride ahead for world economies. You're listening to the Costa Report.
Have you checked out the Costa Report blog yet? Well, what are you waiting for? There's no quicker way to find out what newsmakers are saying than the Costa Report blog at RebeccaCosta.com. It's where the former CEO of Apple and PepsiCo, John Scully, predicts where the next tech breakthroughs are going to come from. And also where Trent Lott explains why a GOP reversal of the Senate nuclear option will signal real change in our nation's capital. And the Costa Report blog is where you'll discover why Alan Dershowitz is worried that ISIS is adopting Hamas-like tactics. You'll find all this and more at the Costa Report blog. A new blog is posted every week, and they're short, pithy, and tell the unvarnished truth. Just go to RebeccaCosta.com to get the latest blog. That's RebeccaCosta.com. And while you're there, be sure to register for updates and breaking news. The Costa Report blog, bringing you the news the big networks don't and won't.
Heart palpitations? Chest discomfort? Shortness of breath? Join Dr. Gann Dennington of the St. Helena Arrhythmia Center on March 24th and learn about new surgical treatment options that are less invasive and have better outcomes, including the new hybrid maze procedure. That's March 24th at the Quail Lodge and Golf Club in Carmel. Reserve your space today at 877-596-0644. That's 877-596-0644.
Is your internet connection slow? Etheric Networks can help you. Etheric Networks is the Bay Area's locally owned alternative to DSL satellite and cable. We do a few things to make our service better. We have a great reputation, and our staff is committed to providing a great user experience. We listen to our customers and listen to our staff. We pay living wages. Our staff are local Bay Area engineers and professionals. We provide flexibility and personalized service. Being in Silicon Valley, we have direct contact with the networking software and hardware companies and can bring new technologies to market before the cable and phone companies. We operate a tower-based fixed wireless network as well as a fiber optic backbone network that rings the Bay. The combination creates an ultra-reliable high-capacity network that you ought to try. KSCO Business Special. Business service up to 10 megabits per second symmetric for as little as $299 a month with a $399 installation fee. Etheric Networks. Call 650-399-4200. Etheric.net.
When you need legal help, call on the Angel. It's a fact. We'll all need help to resolve a legal matter of one kind or another. When you find yourself in need of legal help, call on Angel Hess Attorney at Law. She's been helping people with legal documents for over 20 years. Now Angel has earned her master's in legal studies and Juris Doctorate and is licensed to practice law for you.
I'm Angel L. Hess, Attorney at Law. With my help, we can resolve your legal matters quickly and efficiently. I will listen to your needs and keep you informed of the pros and cons of each legal strategy. We will find the best course of action for you. And if I can't help you, then I will help you find someone who can.
And today, Angel Hess has an angelic offer for each of you KSCO listeners, and only you KSCO listeners. A free half-hour consultation. That's right. Just pick up the phone and call her with your legal matter, mention KSCO, and get your free consultation today. When you find yourself in need of legal help, call on Angel L. Hess, Attorney at Law in Santa Cruz at 831-426-8536 or www.santacruzlegal.net.
This is Sylvia Panetta inviting you to the 18th Annual Leon Panetta Lecture Series. Our theme this year is the test of leadership in 2015, critical issues that can unite or divide America. Our nation faces choices that are as important as they are divisive. We'll discuss energy, race relations, the economy, and cyber. Secretary Panetta will talk with key experts to help identify the best path for these issues. For more information, call 831-582-4200.
Welcome back to the Costa Report. I'm Rebecca Costa, and if you're just joining us today, our guest is Steve Forbes, who was just explaining that the Congressional Budget Office and Joint Committee on Taxation use a somewhat flawed algorithm when they forecast the benefits of increasing taxes, because their analysis is based on an assumption that increasing the tax burden on citizens and businesses has absolutely no impact on economic contraction or expansion. Did you want to finish up that thought?
Well, I think that about sums it up. What they give to tax increase and tax cuts is very, very minor changes. What they do, though, is if you have a tax cut, they assume you're going to lose the money and lose it mostly forever. So even when you get a cut in the capital gains tax, which has an immediate payback, they think that, in future years you're going to lose the money. All you're doing is bringing it forward faster. So it's biased against pro-growth tax cuts. Now, the House Republicans and the House of Representatives changed the rules and said these people, the Congressional Budget Office, should use what they call dynamic scoring or realistic scoring, but they didn't change the personnel. And knowing how Washington works, if you leave the fox with the hen house, you know what's going to happen to the hens. And it'll be 20 years before we see any real change.
Isn't this just a matter of who you trust to invest the money? I mean, if you pay the taxes to the government, you're saying you trust the government to invest that money properly. And if you make a tax cut, you're saying you trust private citizens and business to make that investment in the economy.
Well, let's even be more graphic. Who would you rather have managing your money, Warren Buffett or Nancy Pelosi? Or Harry Reid? I think
my answer is anybody but me. There's a lot of people nodding their head up and down. Managing money's always been a mystery to me. It should be simple, but it's way over my head now. I can't be the only person that sits down with a financial advisor and nods her head up and down like I know what they're talking about. And shame on me.
Well, you know, the Washington politicians don't know what they're talking about, even if they nod their heads or say they know what they're doing.
You're absolutely right. They nod their heads up and down too, and I know darn well they don't understand economic policy as well as they pretend to. Now, switching gears for just a moment from domestic fiscal policy to the outlook for the euro and the countries that are tied to it, and the growing instability in the Middle East and in the Ukraine. You've forecasted a bumpy ride for world economies in this next year. So can you speak to that for a moment?
Yes, even though the U.S. is doing slightly better, although we're not doing that well ourselves, the rest of the world is pretty much in bad shape. There are certain countries doing a little better, like Great Britain. But you look at Europe, much of Europe is in recession. You look at Japan, Japan's in recession. China is slowing down. And you look at Latin American countries, Brazil is in a recession. Mexico has slowed down. So that's going to drag our growth as well. And we're not growing fast enough to pull up the rest of the world economy. And they are slowing down enough to give a real pullback to us. And part of the reasons that these countries are in trouble is, among other things, is their high taxes. Japan has a high rate of 51% on income. They also have, in this country, our payroll taxes, for Social Security and Medicare is about 15%, with a cap for most of it at about $118,000 a year. In Japan, you know what the payroll tax is? 30% with no cap.
Well, I'll tell you the thing that bothers me is it's hard to add up all the taxes that you pay, because even you go to a hotel and you've got a hotel tax and you've got a service tax and
a convention tax.
A convention tax. And, I don't think people realize how many taxes they really are paying if you start adding them all up. And now they're even talking about taxing purchases on the Internet.
Yes, and that's another thing about the national sales tax is that tax will apply to everything on the Internet. So you'd pay a 30% tax on the stuff you buy on the Internet.
Well, that is what scares me about the fair tax is because they're looking at the Internet and they know that there's a gold mine there.
Well, they see anybody with money and they think that's a gold mine, sadly. Mm-hmm. And you're right about all the taxes we pay. What do you do when you get up in the morning? You turn on the lights. Well, look at your next electricity bill. In some states they don't break out, but it's loaded with various taxes and fees. Same thing with your water bill. When you go have a cup of coffee in your kitchen, you're paying a sales tax probably on that coffee. You go to work, you're paying gasoline taxes. So everything you do, they tax, including...
I just got a bill for a sewage tax that they need to tax us because they have to control the water going from the neighborhood into the ocean. I never heard of such a thing, but it's a tax.
Any excuse will do.
Well, now you've made the point that the European Central Bank seems to be going down the same rabbit hole as the U.S. Federal Reserve and the Bank of Japan in terms of using quantitative easing to try to stimulate their economic growth. Is that right?
That's right. And what they've done, in effect, is make it easy for governments to finance their deficits. In this country, the Federal Reserve buys, until they stopped it a few months ago, would buy most of the government's new long-term bonds. They bought almost over $3 trillion worth. And then, at the end of the year, the Federal Reserve then takes the interest, minus their own expenses, and return it back to the government. So it would be as if you took out a mortgage, paid the interest, and then got the interest back at the end of the year. You'd say, hey, that's pretty good. Deficit without tears.
I'd like to get that deal.
Yeah, well, what they've ended up doing is making it very hard for small and new businesses to get credit. I was talking to a couple of community bankers yesterday, and they were telling about all the regulations they have, all the paperwork they have to make routine loans. They're not allowed to use their judgment anymore. So guess what? Less lending gets done.
Absolutely. But if not quantitative easing, how would you recommend the European Central Bank respond? Because they're in a world of hurt right now.
Well, recognize that the central bank can't cure their tax codes, can't cure their crazy labor regulations that make it hideously expensive to hire somebody. And so people get hired off the books or they're hired as private contractors. But in Greece, you mentioned Greece earlier, 23% sales tax, 45% payroll tax, 46% income tax. No wonder they don't pay taxes over there. They wouldn't have any money if they did.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's right. In hindsight, as you look back, was the euro a bad idea?
No, it's a sensible idea. Make it easy to travel around. It's like having the dollar, the currency for the U.S. Imagine what it would be like if you had a California dollar and an Oregon dollar and a Nevada dollar and a New York dollar. We would have much less prosperity. It'd be much more complicated. But they haven't done it right. They have tried. They're undermining the euro, and because countries get in trouble doesn't mean the euro should get in trouble. Illinois is the worst state in the union when it comes to credit rating. Their finances are a shambles. They have a new governor, Republican governor, who is tackling these things. But because Illinois has a problem doesn't mean Illinois should shuck off the dollar and adopt a peso or something, the Illinois peso. It's a credit problem. It's an economic problem. So if they knew what they were doing, the euro would work fine. But manifestly, they don't.
Yeah, but when you reduce diversification, it's something you certainly don't do in a volatile financial environment. You try to diversify as much as possible. And I guess my point is that the minute you start to drive anything towards singularity, you make that system more vulnerable if you don't build in some, backups, which clearly weren't built in properly. Now, we're going to have to take, I don't want to leave you hanging on that question, but we have to take our last break. I'm up against hard breaks here, which is the bane of this program. Right. I come up against these hard breaks and I'm going, oh, gee, the conversation was just getting going. And sure enough, we got to go to a sponsor break. So we'll take our last break, but stay right where you are. We'll be right back with more from Steve Forbes. You're listening to the Costa Report. If you're wondering what to do with all that data you're creating, do I have an offer for you? Tableau is drag-and-drop software that people of any skill level can use to analyze and turn data into something actionable. That's right, I said actionable. And isn't that what all that data is for? With Tableau, you can connect to any data in virtually any format and visualize it on the fly. Databases, spreadsheets, even big data sources are instantly combined into usable charts, graphs, reports, and dashboards. People can analyze data and drag and drop at 10 times the speed of a traditional business intelligence system. But the most impressive thing about Tableau is that anyone can use it. And just to prove the point, you can get a free 14-day trial from Tableau just by mentioning you heard this ad. But do it now, because this offer won't last. For your free 14-day trial, visit Tableau at tableau.com/Costa. That's tableau.com/Costa. Tableau software. What's your data trying to tell you? I'm here today with Scott Caraccioli of Caraccioli Cellars, and I have a question for you, Scott. What goes into making Method Champenois bubble?
It's a process that's really defined by the French government that we've taken and enacted into our wines, which really drive the quality of our sparkling project.
So this is a process that the French government defines pretty specifically, and you remain faithful to that?
Yeah, 100%. And in some places, we push it a little bit.
Now, how do the bubbles translate on the palate?
It really gives you that vehicle, that mousse for the character of the sparkling wine, carrying the fruit and the complexity. It's the expression of the wine. To find out more about Caraccioli wines, visit us at www.caracciolicellars.com or stop by our tasting room in downtown Carmel, California. That's Caraccioli Cellars, CARACCIOLI, Cellars. Come taste the difference.
When your home needs repairs, you fix it. Shouldn't we treat our bodies just as well? If you have joint pain, it's time to get help. Learn more at DominicanHospital.org. Dignity Health, including Dominican Hospital. Hello, human kindness.
Hi, I'm Andy, the produce manager at Ben Lomond Market. This week we are featuring green cabbage, 49 cents a pound, large red potatoes, 49 cents a pound, and 1 pound bag baby peeled carrots, 89 cents each. Add some corned beef and you have a perfect dinner. We have California navel oranges, 89 cents a pound, head lettuce, 99 cents each, and 2 pound clamshell strawberries are $3.99 each. From Washington, we have large Fuji apples, 89 cents a pound, large Gala apples, 99 cents a pound, and Granny Smith apples, 99 cents a pound. In organics, we are featuring California green cabbage, 89 cents a pound, 1 pound bag kiwi fruit, $1.99 each, and red organic grapefruit, 89 cents each. We have many more specials in our produce department, so come check out our great selection of fresh produce at Ben Lomond Market.
This is Dean Mitchell Winnick, co-host of Wagner and Winnick on the Law. Do you think lawyers are too expensive? Would you use a licensed legal technician, someone more than a paralegal but less than a lawyer, if new California licensing rules created this professional category? Join my co-host, Professor Stephen Wagner, and me this Saturday, Wagner and Winnick on the Law, from 3 to 5 p.m. We'll consider whether California should adopt Washington state rules that allow the licensure of legal technicians.
Welcome back to the Costa Report. I'm Rebecca Costa, and our guest today is Steve Forbes. And I left you at the end of the last segment with the thought that perhaps the economies which converted to the euro might be better off if they remained diversified, because anytime you drive towards singularity, you increase efficiency, but you also increase the risk of unilateral failure. And so I think this is why we all have heard endless times from our financial advisors, diversify, diversify, diversify. Some things will go up, others will go down. Weren't we more stable as a global economy when companies' economies were, or countries' economies were vastly different?
Well, they are vastly different today, even in Europe, as you compare Greece with Germany. The Germans who write the subsidy checks will testify. They wish they could tell the Greeks where to go, and maybe someday they will. So they have not homogenized Europe. As a matter of fact, even though we use the word Europe, the French are still very French, and the Italians are still very Italian. So we have the idea that you can put people into a cookie cutter never, ever works. And people who try it always fail, as the Soviet Union demonstrated.
But wasn't it clear pretty much when the euro was started that one or two countries not conforming to the requirements wasn't it clear that they would eventually bring the euro into trouble?
Well, you would have thought that they would have thought twice about bringing in a country like Greece, even before Greece admitted several years ago that it was cooking the books of its finances. It was clear that they weren't as far along as some other countries were. So the enthusiasm got the better of them, and we'll see if they can keep this thing going. But the key thing, though, is that none of the countries know how to manage their money very well, including the United States. The dollar today is like a yo-yo, and that's destructive to investment. That's why we wrote a book called Money, How the Destruction of the Dollar Threatens the Global Economy, and what we can do about it. It's bad stuff, and I think what eventually we'll do is do what we did for the first 180 years of our country's existence, and that is link the dollar's value to gold. We did it from the 1790s to the 1970s, and we had good growth rates, even average growth rates, even though we had plenty of turmoil, a civil war, a Great Depression, 2 world wars. Over that span of period of time, we did very well, and we haven't done as well since.
But even tying it to gold, you also recommended an audit of the Federal Reserve. Is that right?
Yes. Well, the Federal Reserve was created by Congress, and therefore its policies should be subject to review, not just in a haphazard congressional hearing, but finding out what exactly they're doing. What are their metrics? How do they measure success or failure? What are their trading methods? Are they how good are they in dealing in the marketplace when they buy and sell bonds? Basic stuff that any other entity you would want to know about. But the Fed seems to think that it should be treated as like the Chinese, as the Middle Kingdom.
Well, I agree.
Above we mere mortals.
It is above us mere mortals. This is why I would like them to rename the Federal Reserve Bob's Bank. I think if we renamed it Bob's Bank, that it would be clear that they are a private entity and not an extension, not a department of the federal government. I think people are still confused about that. I mean, maybe not you and maybe not our members in Congress and experts, but there's still a lot of people that think the Federal Reserve is some branch of government.
Yeah, and a sort of a fourth branch that was enshrined in the Constitution, which manifestly it was not. But I like that idea, Bob's Bank.
Yeah, we'll call it Bob's Bank, and then it becomes clear Bob's Bank is making money off of us.
And it strips of its authority, too. It's hard to worship Bob's Bank.
There you go. So a last question for you. Aside from taxes, the $18 trillion debt, the Federal Reserve or Bob's Bank, the potential collapse of the euro, what keeps you awake these days?
It's one is worry about overseas. The fact the U.S. is now seen as weak, that we're gutting our military. Iran is now bent on getting nuclear weapons and being the dominant power, establishing an empire in the Middle East. Putin is still on the warpath in Ukraine and may threaten other neighbors in the neighborhood. Who knows what China may do? So when you have a U.S. that's seen as weak, which we should have learned from the 1970s, bad things happen. But it seems that lesson has to be learned and relearned and relearned. And here at home, one of the things I think gives me encouragement is, for example, the movement towards radical tax reform. We mentioned earlier several presidential candidates are interested in the flat tax, and that's why we've started an organization called Americans for Hope, Growth, and Opportunity. You can find it online, ahgo.us, to help promote the flat tax. The bottom line, Rebecca, is what Ronald Reagan said. He said, you don't change minds on Capitol Hill through sweet reason. You do it through the heat of public opinion, and we intend to help turn up that heat.
That's absolutely right. There can be no change. I tell listeners this all the time. There can be no change without critical mass. If you want to argue with people, that's fine. But at some point, you have to recruit them. Because if you're alienating everybody, you can't get critical mass. It's not how you get it. We didn't have civil rights change here in the United States. We have not experienced any significant changes here in the United States without critical mass. And so the idea is recruit, get people on your side, and then this is the old bottom-up management, isn't it?
Absolutely, and I think this internet age with radio, which you're an expert at, and way of getting messages around, we should be able to generate some pretty good heat pretty quickly.
Absolutely, and we have to. And I also tell people you've got to use all forms of media. You've got to be on the air. Well,
yes.
You know this. I mean, Forbes Media, you've been more entrepreneurial in the publishing area than anyone else, reaching out and creating new internet products, new vehicles, so that these messages can get out to folks. Because, do they need to hear it? And I do believe most people are confused about what the Federal Reserve is. I do believe that they are confused about a flat tax versus a fair tax. And if you don't get the facts out there, they're easily replaced by fiction. And so I want to thank you for creating so many venues through the Forbes machine, if you will, of creating so many venues to get the facts out there. And I also want to take some time to thank you for speaking with us today. We are almost out of time. Before we go, can you give that web address one more time?
Yes, Americans for Hope, Growth, and Opportunity. The web is ahgo.us.
Okay, and I hope everybody will go there and get information and participate. And remember, stop arguing with your friends. Recruit them instead. Thank you again.
Thank you.
Thank you very much for joining us today, and come back soon.
Look forward to it. Thank you.
If your station is leaving us after this first hour and you have a question or a comment to make about our interview with Steve Forbes, you can email me at RebeccaCosta.com or drop me a note on Facebook, Twitter, and LinkedIn. And if you missed the full interview with Mr. Forbes or with any of our other previous guests, you can download episodes of the Costa Report from our website, Apple iTunes, Podbean, our YouTube channel, and also the Voice America Business Channel. And here's some great news. If you're a regular listener and you want to hear more in-depth, unbiased coverage by the media, there's an easy way that you can keep independent journalism alive, and it won't cost you 1 red cent. The next time you're going to order a book, a printer cartridge, a CD, or even a gift from Amazon, please go to our website at RebeccaCosta.com first. By clicking on any book on our bookstore page, it'll take you right over to Amazon's main webpage, where you can make your purchases. And every time you go through our bookstore to make a purchase at Amazon, Amazon donates a small percentage of your purchases to the Costa Report. Like I said, it will not cost you 1 red cent. So help keep excellent programming on the air by making one short detour on your way to Amazon. And speaking of audiences all around the world, my guest next week is one of the foremost experts on Russian politics, Mr. Vladimir Posner, who's going to be here to help us understand what Putin's plans are and how the U.S. should respond. Don't miss Vladimir Posner next week on the only news program that puts policy ahead of politics. Now stay tuned for another hour of Straight Talk Radio. You're listening to the Costa Report.
For 50 years, the American Program Bureau has represented some of the most famous, in-demand female speakers from around the world. From award-winning actresses to activists, journalists, best-selling authors, and innovative business and community leaders, these speakers have inspired and empowered millions on the screen, in print, and in front of live audiences. APB's roster includes the first female president of Ireland and former UN Commissioner for Human Rights, Mary Robinson, the first female president of Liberia and Nobel Prize laureate Ellen Johnson Sirleaf, and Pulitzer-winning journalist Cheryl Wudunn. To schedule a leading female speaker for your next event, contact the American Program Bureau at 1-800-225-4575. That's the American Program Bureau at 1-800-225-4575 and apbspeakers.com.
Coast Paper and Supply has been family-owned and operated since 1948. They have a wide array of products available, including brand name and eco-friendly cleaning supplies, paper goods, and compostable plates, cups, and cutlery. Whether your needs are for business or home, Coast Paper and Supply's friendly and reliable staff have what you're looking for. They even accommodate special orders. You can find them at 151 Josephine on River Street in Santa Cruz, Monday through Friday from 8 a.m. to 4:30, or call at 831-423-3350. Coast Paper and Supply is a proud member of Think Local First.
Michael Olson's second law of the food chain. The farther we go from the source of our food, the less control we have over what's in our food. Now that so much of our food comes from thousands of miles away, we should all get together Saturday at 9 a.m. as the Food Chain Radio Show tracks down who is putting what in our food. If you have a comment about the second law of the food chain, tell me, Michael Olson, all about it at metrofarm.com. Now, see you all on KSCO Saturday 9 a.m. for some What's Eating Grunt Radio on the food chain.
What day was that?
Serving Northern California for over 65 years. This is KSCO Santa Cruz. This hour of the Costa Report is brought to you by IBM. big data at the speed of business.
Welcome back to the second hour of the Costa Report. I'm Rebecca Costa, and during the first hour, we had an opportunity to speak with business icon and editor-in-chief of Forbes magazine, Mr. Steve Forbes. Forbes, as you heard in my introduction, was born to the Forbes publishing empire, started by his grandfather, C.B. Forbes, then inherited by his father, Malcolm, and which allowed Steve Forbes to cut his teeth as a columnist and later as chairman of the Forbes Media Corporation. As you heard today, Forbes is in favor of a flat tax. He's also in favor of cutting taxes and an audit of the Federal Reserve System. And I think I got a fan there for my idea to call it Bob's Bank. And he also is very concerned about current U.S. monetary policy, particularly the value of the dollar, what it's tied to. Throughout his career, he's been extremely consistent and insistent that reforms are needed to energize a slow and tenuous economic recovery. Now, as you know, Forbes has been at this for a while, but it wasn't until recently that the economic benefits of a flat tax have been quite so apparent. We have some very powerful examples staring us in the face today, in particular, the comparison between Greece, which is taxing its citizens so heavily to try to dig out of debt that it's one of the highest tax countries in the world. The highest payroll tax Greeks pay is 45%. That doesn't include a battery of other taxes that they pay. Similar to the way that the U.S. Congressional Budget Office and Joint Committee on Taxation looks at taxes, the Greek government believes that the higher you raise taxes, the more money that will come in to the government. In other words, all you have to do is open the spigot wider, and more money will flow into the government, allowing the debt to eventually reverse itself. But there's a very dangerous assumption which underlies this widen the spigot mentality. And that assumption is that lower taxes have absolutely no impact on economic growth. In other words, it assumes that there is zero upside to lowering taxes for businesses or for citizens. Now, in a recent article, Forbes reminds us that in the 1980s, the Joint Committee on Taxation, they ran a calculation, an imaginary calculation on what would happen if the U.S. government taxed 100% all of your income. And the JCT reported that the government would be flush with surpluses. They loved the idea. It would, as Forbes wrote, it would be a gusher for money. But what they didn't include in their analysis was the impact that would have on economic growth. Imagine if everything you made, you paid to the government. You don't have to be an economist to figure out what paying the government everything you earn would have on the economy. It would be devastating. So now the faultiness of that kind of thinking, I believe, has become even more apparent and more obvious. As Greece began increasing the tax burden on its citizens, its economy began contracting more and more and more. The debt did not decrease as a result of the influx of tax monies. In fact, people stopped paying their taxes altogether. They couldn't afford them. Unemployment didn't go down. The country's ability to attract investment capital went down, and all of the results were negative. Forbes points out that all the while Greece was pursuing the raising of taxes, neighboring countries such as Bulgaria and Albania, countries which had a flat 10% tax on personal income, they were expanding. Same region of the world, same challenges in a recessionary economy, but one country was raising taxes and the others were simplifying and keeping a lid on taxes. But there's more. Forbes points out that this same phenomena was observed in Russia. In 2000, Russia had an even more complex, destructive, and oppressive tax system than Greece has. Hard to believe, but it's true. And one of Putin's first acts was to institute a simple flat tax of 13% on all personal income across the board. And then he went further. He began cutting taxes everywhere in Russia. And this is at a time when Russia's economy was struggling to find its footing. So on the surface, a lot of people thought these were the actions of a madman. But what happened as a result of that flat tax and those cuts? Almost overnight, Russian revenues began to soar. Now, just to be clear, Forbes and other flat tax advocates in the U.S. are in favor of instituting a minimum floor below which a citizen would pay no income taxes. So, in truth, the flat tax would kick in once you got above a certain survival level. For a family of four, that's roughly $52,000. So, below that $52,000, a mother, father, 2 children, you don't pay any taxes. Above that, maybe around 17%. Now, some want that floor to be a specific minimum tax exemption for every adult and child. Some want it to just be a flat number. Either way, the flat tax would start after you got over a defined subsistence level. Now, as you know, we are quickly coming up on April 15th, the deadline to file our taxes. And so as we start thinking about the refund we'll be getting or the check that we have to write, it's a good time to look at how other countries tax their citizens and also whether the algorithms which the government agencies presently use that assume taxes have nothing to do with economic growth or contraction need to be reformed. They're dangerous. Now, on that note, we're going to have to take another short break. But when we return, Sam Quentin and Bill Graff are going to join me in our weekly roundtable. And we're going to talk about taxes before it becomes tax time. I think it's a good time to talk about it now while you're sitting at your kitchen tables and running all your numbers. So we'll be back in one moment right after this short break. You're listening to the Costa Report.
Hi, registered pharmacist Ben Fuchs here. I've been studying healthy bodies for 35 years, and what I've got to tell you may shock and surprise you, but if you listen up, it may change your life. The medical model cannot help the cell. It can only injure the cell. So what does it do? It does misdirection, the famous classic magician's trick. Look over here. Don't look at the cell.